I hope you've all had a chance to have a bite to eat this morning. We're going to start the proceedings now, just so you can all get upstairs and grab a seat before we start our programming at 9 a.m. My name is Joy Robbins, and I'm the Global Chief Advertising Officer for the New York Times Company. And I am delighted to be introducing the breakfast session today, where we're going to be talking about the poignant topic of conscious consumption. It's a topic I am sure is close to many of our hearts as we look to adjust our own purchasing decisions. But we need to be thinking critically about what information and tools businesses can provide consumers with to make sustainable choices more accessible. I know this will be the start of a conversation you'll hear more through the course of the day at Climate Forward. Our breakfast this morning is sponsored by Mastercard, and I want to take this opportunity to thank our colleagues from Mastercard who are here this morning for your partnership. We are so deeply grateful for the support you're providing for our Climate Forward series and, by extension, our journalists who are out in the field every day. Now to our panel this morning. I'm delighted to welcome Sophia Lee, who will be moderating this conversation. Sophia is a climate advocate and journalist. Harvard named her one of the top climate communicators in 2022, and as she was awarded the Refinery 29's Sustainable Innovator Award. She'll be joined by Ellen Jackowski, the Chief Sustainability Officer of MasterCard, and Chris MacAulay, the U.S. Country Manager of Too Good to Go. Please join me in welcoming Sophia and our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. Ooh, all right, so before we get started, because we're going to talk about an incredibly juicy topic during Climate Week especially, I invite you to take 3 breaths with me because it's early, you have a long day of programming ahead, and it's been a long Climate Week. So let's get a little present. So I invite you to close your eyes and get rooted in your seat and take a deep inhale through your nose with me here. Hold it at the top. Let it out of your mouth with a sigh. Another deep inhale through your nose. Hold it at the top. And let it out with a deeper sigh out of your mouth. Hold it. Inhale one more time. Inhale through your nose. Hold it at the top. Take a sip of breath in with your mouth. Keep holding it. And let it out with the deepest sigh yet out of your mouth. Here we go. Thank you. And you can join me. All right. So let's address the elephant in the room first. We're going to straight on deep dive into it. The elephant in the room is that we need less consumption. And that has been a big theme during Climate Week. And I want to first ask you both, do we think conscious consumption can even exist? Ellen, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, so excited to be here today. Thanks to the New York Times, Sophia and Chris for this dialogue. I mean, there's no choice, right? We have to make this happen. We're MasterCard. We have 90 million merchants, 20,000 banking partners, and 3 billion cardholders. There are 8 billion people on the planet. So we can see a good portion of the consumption that is happening, right? We have a view into this world, and it's clear our biggest opportunity is to help the transition to a sustainable, renewable, regenerative economy. And so without question, this is what we need to do, and the time is right, the time is now. That's why we're having this dialogue.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Ellen. And Chris, we all have heard of MasterCard, but for those who haven't heard of Too Good to Go, can you please explain what it is, and then your thoughts on conscious consumption?
Sure. So Too Good to Go is the world's largest marketplace for surplus food. So it's an app you can download, little commercial plug. You go to Google Play Store or iPhone App Store. Uses your location to show participating partners, so restaurants, grocery stores. You purchase a surprise bag. You pick a place you want to purchase from. You're getting a surprise bag, so you don't know the food you're going to get, but you're going to get a great deal. So, for example, you spend $5 in the app, you're going to get $15 worth of food. So what we're doing is helping our food partners move the food that they would throw into the trash into consumers' hands for consumption, in large part because 40% of all food gets thrown straight into the trash bin. It's the largest contributor to CO2e for the environment as it breaks down in landfills. So we're excited about what we're doing to help. I think from a conscious consumption perspective, yes, I mean, we need to get there. I think it's in many ways the challenge is how can we create the biggest tent possible to help people get there. So, I think everybody's probably on well, maybe in this room, people are further along in a journey towards understanding and being more conscious about the everything from the goods that you're purchasing to the food that you're eating and what you're throwing away and or leaving unconsciously. So. What we want to do is invite more people along that journey. I think having partners like you, is really an important part of that as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris. And I've used Too Good To Go, and I'm a huge fan. That surprise bag is really fun. Okay, Ellen, so we need less consumption. And I want to ask you, how does MasterCard reconcile meeting climate-based targets with scaling? And can we ever get to absolute decoupling?
Sure. Well, so again, MasterCard is a payments technology system. I came from HP. I was there before I joined MasterCard. HP makes a lot of products, like printers, PCs. So I've come from the supply side of making a bunch of stuff to a company that's really anchored on the demand side. So again, this is the big opportunity here of how do we connect these two things, right? Companies like HP with the demand of the 3 billion cardholders that we have. So I think that's the big opportunity. And we've started with our first iteration of a product called the MasterCard Carbon Calculator. And we offer that to our banking partners to deliver to our cardholders. Hopefully all of you in the room have a MasterCard. And at the end of the month, what we provide is, of course, the line items of what you purchased and the total financial spend, as well as the line items from a carbon point of view with the estimated carbon impact of each purchase. Now, of course, that's only as good as the data that we have. So right now, it is at the sector level. We're moving to the merchant level, and the vision is to get down to the SKU level. And of course, this is post-transaction right now, right? The consumer's getting this after they've already made the choice. So a good start, a good first step, but wouldn't it be even better if we moved it to the beginning of the value chain? So as you're making the decision, you've got trusted, verified information of what is the carbon impact of your purchase, and would you like to make that purchase or perhaps a different purchase? So the role of informing consumers so that they can make better decisions is something that we're very excited about.
Thank you, Ellen, because you guys are B to B to C. So it's a bit of more of a zigzag model. Yes. Chris, I wanted to ask you, because we talk a lot about circularity and circular models. I don't think we've fully achieved it yet. So how does Too Good To Go approach a circular model as much as you can in the current systems?
I think it's maybe a little more straightforward for us in the sense that as we think about food, right? It's pretty binary, right? It's getting consumed or it's not.
You're going to either eat that croissant today or you're not.
Well, I think I just wanted to let everybody know we're locking the doors till the buffet is no.
There has to be zero food waste. That has to be completely empty by the time everyone leaves. So
I made that
keep
joke.
Munching.
I did make that joke at dinner last night. I was the only one that finished the dessert, though, so I don't know. I think from a circular perspective, right? It's so much about education and awareness. So it's as we think about waste, it can't be quite as circular for food, right? I think so. What we're trying to do is really engage and educate related to the ways in which you can make the most of the food that you're coming into contact with, whether that's how you grocery shop or what you do with the things that are in the back of your fridge, or what's the frequency with which you're looking to purchase food or go out to eat. What are you doing with the food that you take home, hopefully, from the restaurant that's left over, given portion sizes, et cetera. So I think it's for us, it's a little bit less about the circular nature of it, and it's more about really trying to push to the end point where you're really not throwing much away, on a day-over-day basis. So I think it's a little bit different. I think what we see, though, is in terms of partners, there's a lot of really interesting businesses out there that are tapping into opportunities to take things that were a product in one way and then turning them into another product. So whether that's clothing or other things, I think there's just a lot of interesting things happening in the space.
What would a true circular model look like for Too Good To Go in the food system in the future, Chris?
Well, I think from that perspective, we're, as I described, if we think about food waste as a supply chain, we're really tackling the very last endpoint where we're looking to divert the food that goes into the trash and put it into someone's hands who can use it, whether that's ideally some combination of folks that are food insecure as well as people that are looking to enjoy the surprise bag. What we're hoping to do, and from a product perspective, is to move our way up the supply chain so that we can get smarter with our partners. So that looks a lot like scanning products from an inventory perspective to ensure that we're using the right tactics on shelf. Because part of the challenge is consumers, when you walk into a store, I'm guilty of it too, you're expecting a full bounty and full array of products. And I think ultimately, if I walked into a bagel store at 3 o'clock right before they close, I mean, should I really expect to be able to choose from 40 varieties of bagels? Like, I don't think so. So what we want to do is get smarter at the front end through dynamic routing and tracking of inventory, then being able to help be smarter about decision making related to food donation or using the marketplace, get much, much better around food labeling. So it's really starting to tackle all the components that contribute to food waste in a way that makes it a little bit more circular.
Amazing. Ellen, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the greatest challenges that MasterCard faces in achieving a sustainable consumption model that is based off of circularity?
Sure. So the way that we view our strategy around driving this transformation towards sustainable consumption, there are 3 pillars. The first is inspire. So how do we all get really excited about this new way to consume, right? Thinking about alternative options, thinking about new business models like Too Good To Go. So, the messaging around the future of how we should be living. And you may be familiar with Priceless, right? MasterCard's incredible brand, which has really over the last, decades started to paint this picture of what is a priceless experience? Well, when we put in, the layer of sustainable consumption on top of that, it's reinventing kind of how we live by creating more value for our planet and our future. So the inspire pillar, I think, is really important in terms of changing the tone of consumption and creating inspiring concepts for the future of how we want to live. And that, of course, should start right now. The second pillar is inform. And so we talked about the example of the carbon calculator. That's our first product where we're really helping to educate. So it is up to the consumer, right? MasterCard's not going to judge what you purchase. But if we can do a better job of helping you understand what you're purchasing and what those options are, then that's going to serve everybody and help accelerate this transformation. And then the final pillar is engage. So there, of course, with credit cards, you get lots of points for things. How can we reinforce the rewards of the choices that you're making to be more sustainable? How can we help provide actions for you to take based on what you're consuming? So, for example, we have a program called the Priceless Planet Coalition, and that's our commitment to restore 100 million trees. And through our carbon calculator, we also offer the ability to make donations to restore trees based on your consumption patterns. So there's all sorts of ways to incentivize this shift in behavior. So inspire, inform, enable.
Inspire, inform, enable. And Ellen, I feel like a lot of times the consumer feels like they have so much pressure and weight on them to reverse the entire climate crisis. That is in the hands of the consumer, the carbon calculator. And what do you think MasterCard is responsible for on the business side?
Well, we have 90 million merchants on our network. Those merchants make a lot of stuff, right? How do we inspire, inform, and enable our merchants to also be a clear part of leading this transformation, right? If they're not offering products and services that those consumers want that are, along that journey towards the sustainable consumption transformation, then that's an issue. So continuing to highlight great options like Too Good To Go, we can play a really big role in that.
Amazing, thank you. Chris, so Too Good To Go started in Europe, where doggy bags and taking home leftovers are maybe not as socially acceptable in certain areas, like in France, it's not as socially acceptable. What were some of the greatest challenges in making sure that Too Good To Go became a sustainable business model in these countries and these societal norms?
Yeah, I think in Europe, actually, the company benefited from a little bit of a tailwind related to some of the regulations. So there's a much higher awareness related to food waste in Europe. So we're in 17 countries, primarily in Western and Northern Europe, as well as the United States and Canada. So the company's been able to grow given the combination of a great consumer experience where you're getting a really good deal. It's really a bounty of food that you're getting for a great price, our partners are getting tremendous value from the fact that we're bringing new customers into the stores. They're typically maybe purchasing incremental items from a grocery store, from a restaurant. And then, the environment's a big win as well. And that story really resonates in Europe. I think potentially from a sensibility perspective, we're a little bit further behind here in the States. But I think, once the company was able to sort of tap into that storytelling, it's really taken off.
Okay, amazing. And you mentioned that regulation and policy played a huge role in the EU. What regulation and policy should we be supporting in the US?
Well, I think, California just took a huge step in terms of the, interested to see what you think about that, actually, as it relates to transparency around emissions reporting. And I think that, what we see is really, you asked an earlier question around what's MasterCard's responsibility. I think that, ultimately, we're all going to have to understand that we have a debt and a responsibility to try to solve the problem. And so I think regulation is an important one. The thing is that there's a lot of unintended consequences from certain regulations. I think we're sort of seeing that play out a little bit in Europe. They have high subsidies for farmers in France to donate food. They get a 50% payment of the value, right? That changes the dynamic of how farmers think about how they're going to handle their food. Here in the U.S., like California is really probably leading the way as it relates to how they're thinking about regulation around both transparency and waste. So ideally, we can marry that with an approach. I think that we're excited about the fact that as a B Corp, when the better that we do financially is the more that we get closer to our goal of a world with no food waste. So.
Amazing. Ellen, any thoughts on this new policy in California on transparency?
Sure. Well, I do think what California is doing, and typically does, I'm a resident of California, by the way, they're always kind of forging that first step, similar to what we see in this space coming out of Europe. And what I think is very interesting in Europe is the product passport regulation that they're considering and that they're researching. So we've had a series of discussions with them because in the sense that, we started talking about this carbon calculator and the data problem. How do we get to more granular, trusted data? Because what we're not going to do is go to our 90 million merchants and say, hey, everybody, start filling out fields for what the carbon impact is of all of your products without it being verified and structured and all those things. Greenwashing in, greenwashing out, we certainly can't be a part of that. Garbage in, garbage out, don't want that type of data. So the work that the EU is doing around the product passport is very interesting, and we're following that closely.
Yeah, I love the product passports and the digital IDs that's coming on board. Ellen, sustainable consumption or sustainable consumption in general used to mean replacing one product with another sustainable product. It was one for one. And now there's so many different ways of interacting with those models. How does MasterCard approach these new models and not just making sure it's a one-for-one replacement model?
Yeah, I would say the kind of the burden there, or the opportunity really there, isn't so much for MasterCard, but it is for the merchants. It's for the manufacturers to figure that out. So are they going from a transaction model of selling stuff to a circular model of a service providing that? So leasing, renting, buying Second Life products and services. So we're certainly open to all of those options. We can transact on any of them. But I think, again, the role that we can particularly play is highlighting the success stories of how some of our merchants have done that and making sure that there's clear awareness of these options and helping them move forward faster.
And for Chris, replacing one for one is actually a good thing because it reduces food waste. You're changing the whole perception around food waste in general. How can that apply to other consumer products beyond food?
I think that's a good question. From my perspective, one of the things that I see is at the fundamental level from a consumer perspective, I think in many ways, we probably feel this here more in the U.S. than ever before. There's like a lot of division and separation. And I think one of the primary separation points that we have is that we see ourselves separate from nature. And so that goes for sort of every product out there. And in fact, we're really a part of this. And certainly if we take the point of view that we're a part of nature and that we're a part of the problem, that means we can also be part of the solution. So when we think about other products, right, I think it's really about how can you maximize the life cycle of the thing that you've purchased, right? So if it's food, you want to eat it all, right? You want to cook it or share it or give it to someone. And I mean, food is such a powerful thing that can bring people together. I think as it relates to other products, being thoughtful around how to get more life out of the thing that you purchased that's a hard problem to solve at the consumer level, right? I mean, we need corporate partners, we need merchants, we need all sorts of businesses thinking in a way that's much more curious as opposed to definitive.
Yes. I love what you said about, we think of ourselves separate as nature, and it's, yes, a climate crisis, but it's also a crisis of connection. Mm-hmm. We have a lack of connection to our food. We have a lack of connection to specific products. And during the pandemic, everyone was like, oh, nature's healing, like humans are the virus. And actually, that's just fundamentally not true, because indigenous communities have lived in equilibrium with nature for hundreds of thousands of years before this time period. So I want to go into specifically how you were talking about like the consumers, and Chris, I want you to share specific proof points about consumer behavior models that Too Good To Go has, and then we'll go to MasterCard.
So I think what we see is actually really, really interesting. So I think, and it maybe fits with the overall sort of theme of Climate Week, in the sense that, when you're in events like this, you're in an environment where everybody thinks about the problem in a similar way. It's easy to get extremely strong in terms of your point of view, in terms of what must happen, and I think that we took that approach early on at Too Good To Go. So, are you interested in saving the environment? Then why aren't you on the platform? It is a line of thinking. From a consumer perspective, though, that what we know very clearly is people have all sorts of reasons for making decisions, and the reason I make a decision today is not going to be the same reason tomorrow. I still haven't figured out the reason to get up and work out in the morning. So I think there's a lot of things that go into the choices that you make. What we see on the consumer side is that the more that we can invite and welcome people in a way that is serving a need or a curiosity, those are the patterns that we see. So I think a lot of people, for example, a lot of people think that the users on our app are primarily very young, very environmentally conscious, and that is for sure a big segment of our users. And yet the biggest segment is females 35 to 44 who are in charge of the household wallet, right? They're the ones making decisions for their families. They're the ones that are interested in getting great food, getting a great deal. Maybe they love the gamification around what's going to be in the bag. There's all sorts of reasons. And so from a consumer data perspective, what we're seeing is that the more that we help people solve a problem, how do you deal with mushy bananas, right, is a problem. The more we can tell stories around solving problems, I mean, I think it's a little bit the three priorities you mentioned too, right? It's inspire, engage, educate. Like, we're trying to do that, and we see that the more we do that, the more users we get on the platform and the more interactive there.
Thank you, Chris. Ellen, are there any interesting proof points on the consumers, consumers that uses MasterCard? Because they're global and all over the world, and in this room. Yeah.
Yes. No, I would agree with that, right? Like, there's lots of reasons people make decisions, and I think that's why, as we think about the journey that we're on, this transformation towards sustainable consumption, we have to be extremely open-minded about how do we inspire, right? Because it's not just kind of, we're navel gazing, right? Like, we all are here at Climate Week, we're all engaged in the programming, so we are one kind of segment of society. How do we stay very open to connecting everybody into this journey and getting them excited to be a part of it too? One point I did want to make, so MasterCard a couple months ago made a big change. We have what are called, and I didn't know this before I came to MasterCard, maybe I should have, there are official rules of the network that we have, kind of like the laws of how you have to work with MasterCard if you're a bank. And we changed one of those official rules about our card. So all the MasterCards that you have in your wallet, by 2028, the material that card needs to be made from cannot be virgin PVC plastic anymore. So what that does, right, is once that change is made and it's required of all the 3 billion MasterCards around the world, then now in everybody's pocket, in everybody's wallet, attached to your phone if that's where you keep your cards, like, this is a nudge. It's a symbol of when you put that down or run it through a machine or tap it, it should be kind of talking to you. You should be kind of looking at it and reflecting, what am I buying? What's the impact of that? Is there an alternative that might be a better choice? So we're really excited about that. And I should also mention, this is part of our digital first strategy. So there are cases where if our issuers feel the cardholder doesn't need an actual physical card made of material, we can just have it available digitally as well. But really excited about those types of signals that we can bring out to our full value chain.
Yeah, that seems like such a small step, but actually right now, virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled plastic. So if a company like Mastercard is saying this is required from all the banks in the world that uses Mastercard, then virgin plastic will be more expensive, which is a good thing because then everyone uses recycle. I want to ask one last question, which is what else is missing from our current discussion on a holistic front for a transparent economy?
Well, I'm going to go back to the data, right? And data can be so overwhelming, right? It's like when you're counting calories and you're trying to, do I really care about the sugar? Do I care about the fat? What actually matters? Same thing, in the environmental world. Can you trust that data? And there's still plenty, this whole space is new. All these regulations that are coming around reporting and carbon footprinting, and how do you even do that? That it's all changing. So I think the more we can continue to try to keep it simple and relatable and understandable is really important as we go on this journey.
Simple and relatable to the consumer or from the business end?
I think all of the above, right? Even as we're having these conversations with across our value chain with the merchant about what we're asking them to do, or the banking partner and what we need them to do in terms of this transformation. A lot of this is just educating everybody, even educating ourselves, right? Especially, again, as these new regulations come out. Do we like these? Are these actually going to influence the behavior change that they were intended to do, or is this going to add a ton of bureaucracy, right? Like, how do we make sure that as we're carving this new world, we're doing it as effectively and efficiently as possible so that we can speed that acceleration, because climate change is here.
Yeah, Chris, what about you?
You said the word that I was going to use. I think it's maybe a little reductive. I think simplicity is really, really important. I think we need to get what effectively amounts to a groundswell of change, both from the consumer side, from everyone, from, governments and companies. And so I think to do that, the analogy that I like to use is essentially 5 years ago, if you said to me, like, I have 2 kids, they're 18 and 15, are you worried about the environment? I would have said, yeah, definitely. And then if you said, well, what are you doing about it? I'd have been like, recycling? It's hard. It's hard. And so the more we can provide easy ways for people to change small habits, even just changing the card, right? Like all of these little things begin to change. And give some rise to some momentum around behaviors. So, ultimately what we want to do is allow people to jump into this change in a way that works for them. And I think it's hard to not be judgmental, and it's hard to not be decisive around things. But, now, right? I legitimately, the amount of food I throw away is infinitesmal, ultimately. And it's partly because I changed the way I shop. It's not just because I changed what I was eating or how much I was eating. And I think that, that takes work, And so as we think about what it means to really get where we want to go, everyone has to find ways to make it really, really simple. That's the nice thing about, like, buy a surprise bag. You can do it for all sorts of reasons, but now you're having an impact. And maybe, hopefully, it inspires you. Maybe it helps you understand a little bit more about the value of things. And I think that's true for how you shop and the merchants that you go to and the visibility that you have around your carbon impact related to what the activities you choose.
Yeah, so it's changing behaviors from a 360 approach.
Yes.
I love that. And also, when you said simplicity, both of you, I think sustainability and climate can seem anything but simple. But it's sustainability is our birthright. Like, it is simple. Like, we were born into a sustainable world. If you look at the words, to sustain ourselves, like, that should be just the baseline, right? To sustain ourselves. To regenerate ourselves, that's another story. So actually, my last quick question is, I heard this week that hope has to be earned. And I think we always talk about hope during this time of doom and gloom. We've had the hottest summer on record. We have floods still happening and wildfires still happening right now. So hope is earned. How do you personally continue to developing and honing in on that hope?
Well, this summer, in addition to being the hottest on the planet ever recorded, some incredible research also came out about a couple of sectors and what types of change are happening. And that's solar, wind, EV battery, and battery storage. And if you look at the data that came out, Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, developed this report. It's incredible. Like, we are here. The technology, the innovation, the ability to scale across these, like gigantic sectors that determine so much of our future, like, it's available now. We can do this now. So it is so easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom. But I think we are at a pivotal point. It's also the moment of the global stock take as we all prepare for COP28. And we know what that stock take says. We're behind. But we cannot get caught up in, we're behind, it was the hottest, oh, this is off. Like, the solutions are here. They're coming, and they're coming faster than we anticipated. So this is the moment to change our behavior, to understand the options we have, and to get really excited and bring your neighbors, your friends, your family with us to start changing the way we consume. So really excited about where we are and the innovations that are available to us right now.
Amazing. Chris?
I don't know the context of hope being earned. I would say I hope that's not true. I think I'm a big believer, that you have to have pain in order to have joy. Well, sure. I think life, a healthy life involves all the emotions, good and bad. And I think that what you just said really resonates. It doesn't, in the same way that it costs you nothing to be kind. Having hope and enthusiasm related to the opportunities that we have ahead of us in order to fix a big problem is, to me, the way forward. I think that many people get really hung up when faced with what feels like an overwhelming or insurmountable problem to solve. And yet, humans we're the greatest manifestation of nature's technology of all time, right? Like, we can absolutely make it happen, and I think that the more that we can tap into a level of enthusiasm and a willingness to do the hard work, then we're going to be in good shape.
Yes, and it's a choice, right? It's a choice to be hopeful. It's a choice to be stubbornly optimistic. It's also a choice if you want to be stuck in the doom and gloom, just like it's a choice to be healthy or to work out in the mornings.
Right.
It's all a choice, and we have
what
that choice.
What are you trying to say?
Raise your hand if you worked out this morning. No, this started at 7 a.m. Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, sir, in the front.
This is all great. This is all great what you're sharing.
Sorry, there's a mic. And
My name's Cliff. I'm from Maine.
Hi, Cliff.
I'm in a research group. And the final comments by Chris and Ellen clearly are obvious. We have the technology, and the transparency is just a little lacking, mostly because of who we are and how we've been. And I think what we need to look at is the basic of how we function on the planet, and it's energy. How do we make our energy? Who's producing our energy? And we know the technology's there: battery storage, locally generated, locally stored, locally distributed. But how many of us can say that we're moving that way yet? And I think part of that transparency is very basic and simple. Let's deal with our energy. And my question to you would be, why aren't we dealing with our energy, and where is it coming from?
Yeah, so
The big, that's a big topic, big question.
yeah, I would say, for companies like MasterCard, it is core, for example, that your exact question, to how we are going to reach our net zero target. So I've been in many sessions this week where we're all talking about, the move to renewables and some of the issues with supply across the globe. MasterCard is already now 100% renewable energy in terms of how we source our operations. But in certain locations, it's definitely still too hard. But I go back to kind of what my recent remarks of the ability to do this is here. The science, the technology to do it is here. So it's how do we continue to make sure everybody is aware of that and not getting caught up in kind of the doom and gloom and focusing on the solutions and implementing them. So we're certainly doing what we can to advocate and educate and make sure that everyone in our value chain is aware of this. Our suppliers are a key part of our carbon footprint, 80%, and we have direct relationships with all of them. We're going through that right now because we've asked them all to report to CDP, if you're familiar with that. The deadline closes at the end of the month, and so we're looking at the numbers every day of how many suppliers have reported to CDP because it's part of us encouraging the rest of our supply chain to transform, and I know a lot of companies are doing that too.
Thank you, Cliff. I think Scope 3 emissions has been a big topic this Climate Week as well. So, any other questions? Yes, in the back here. Sorry, there's a mic coming for you. Yep.
Hi, my name is Durga, and I'm from OCAD University in Toronto. I was just curious, Ellen, when we look at, you mentioned earlier about one of the pillars being, for MasterCard, being changing the tone of purchasing. And when we look at the conscious consumption conundrum as it is now, how do you navigate this element being actually consuming less? How do we actually consume less when, and how do you navigate that, being that MasterCard's foundation and transactions and the amount consumption, it's incentivized to consume more or to encourage others to consume more, especially from the merchant side, because that is one's livelihood or one's growth, one's scaling. So how do you, what does changing the tone of purchasing actually look like, and is there an element of actually consuming less right now?
Yeah. So I think like if you step back and kind of put that into the macro of, let's start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're all human, we need food, we need shelter, we need clothing. We do need things, right? We need to consume. If we stop consuming, that's also a threat to the human future. If we put that then kind of in the context of the value chain of our merchants, right? They make money when people buy their products. Right? And that's how our economy functions, and that's how they stay healthy. That's how jobs are created and all that stuff. MasterCard, of course, kind of same thing. We make money, to your point, when people use their MasterCard and buy things. The transformation that we are going through, like where all of our business models will be disrupted by climate change. We're seeing it already today. So if we're not looking at the reality of what this is going to be, like we're not preparing our business to be successful for the future. So it may include people consuming less. It may include people consuming differently, consuming things and purchasing things with a plan for them to last much longer than they ever have. So I just think that this is a part of all companies, those that make things, and that's how they make money, companies like MasterCard, our whole economy is going to need to shift. This isn't just something that MasterCard and our industry are going to face. So that is a big question. It's a painful question. It's a hard question of how do you transform your business model? But if you are a leader at a company and you're not looking at what's about to happen, what we're in the beginning era of, and trying to figure out how to transform, how do you keep your business profitable and surviving in this new world of consumption, like that's what we all need to be doing, is reinventing what this looks like for all of us, for our profitability, for our sustainability, both from a business and a planet point of view.
Ellen, is there a case study where before MasterCard implemented this and now it's this, basically with that shift of tone of voice, is there a case study you can share? I think.
In terms of messaging, we're continuing, that work, and we have a couple people in the room actually who are leading some of that. So I think they're interested to understand the tone from this room as well. But I would just go back to our product of the carbon calculator. It's only been out in use for about a year. So we're still waiting on the data of like, how are people actually using this? Did they open it once and go, interesting? Are they opening it every month when the bill comes? Like, what are they doing with it? Is it useful? Is it causing any change? And again, put that in the context of we know the data is still high level, so it's not as useful as it will be and all those things. But we are tracking all of this to try to figure out how do we accelerate this shift.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. Yes, here.
Thank you. Hi, Anna Rathman with the Jane Goodall Institute. Really enjoyed this conversation. Chris, I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to get a surprise bag for my family.
Great.
But my question is for Ellen. And Ellen, you mentioned the Priceless Planet Coalition and your efforts around tree planting and reforestation. Obviously, at the Jane Goodall Institute, that's a big focus of ours. Our projects are primarily across Central Africa and the Congo Basin. So I'd love for you to share some successes and maybe some challenges that you faced with that.
Yeah, so we're so proud of our Priceless Planet Coalition. The whole point is the word coalition, right? So what we were intending to do is this was Mastercard, focusing on nature and making investments in nature, aligned with science, right? So the basis of how we pick our projects, you just mentioned, the Congo Basin, that's a very important area to protect, right? The biggest challenge we have with the Priceless Planet Coalition as we try to bring more partners on board, we have about 130 partners, is every time we have this discussion, well, our headquarters are in X country or in X city, and we want to plant the trees here so our customers can see, and our community can benefit from the trees here. If you follow the science of what we need to protect, what we need to restore from a forest point of view, and we do know nature, right, the IPCC report says, 30% of our solution to combat climate change is nature. We will not get there unless nature is part of the solution. But if you're planting it in your backyard and you have limited dollars, that's not going to get us there in the right time frame. So that's the biggest challenge. But our partners are Conservation International and the World Resources Institute. And so we're so privileged to have those experts setting kind of the baseline, the rules of the road of how we're doing restoration, kind of right with the highest integrity. So we have 18 projects around the globe, specifically matched against where the climate science says we need to protect and restore. So if anybody would like to be a part of the Priceless Planet Coalition, we would love to continue to expand towards 100 million trees restored.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you, everyone. That is the conclusion of the conscious consumption conundrum. I know we mentioned the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I just wanted to bring up that in Indigenous First Nations people culture, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle, right? And there's actually an inverted triangle on top of that triangle, because once you reach self-actualization, it's not for individual gain. You actually then share it with your community. So I think we're at a time and a point in society where we've consumed enough, and now everyone in this room, we can then share it with the community, collective climate action. So a round of applause for Chris and Ellen. Thank you so much for having this conversation.
Good job.
And I know you're going to do this anyway, but to continue that collective climate action, if you could just turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself, because we're all in this room for the same reason, and just foster that a little bit more, and take all the food, as Chris would say.
Yeah, please.
Don't waste
Yeah,
any of the
come on.
food. Thank you so much.